Happy holidays everyone, and welcome back to another one of my Outlander reviews and episode 8 of season 4, which happens to be titled Wilmington. So I'm not planning on going through lengthy introductions, as I've already done that once this season, already discussing what I see in the series, the historical aspect, and the unconventional way that romance is presented with either on the pages of the books or on the series. That means that without further ado, let's get started. And number 1. So the 8th episode of this season kicked off with the events out of part 9 from the novel, which happens to have been titled PASSIONNEMENT, which is French for passionately. Now obviously, and while there is a lot of pain and agony involved in the events of this episode, at a lot of points in time it does scream passion. We've also got to remember that all that pain and agony in the novel happens as part of the events of Part 10, Impaired Relations. Which does mean that the episode kicked off with the events of Part 9 from the novel, but did extend to cover Part 10 as well. But generally speaking, yes, the relationships of the three major couples on this episode, Claire and Jamie, Fergus and Marcelly, and Roger and Brianna, which are really the three major relationships highlighted on this episode, the three of them do scream passion. But number 2, there are more people now in the same place, in this case city, all seemingly ready to enact the next chapter in this story. The reunion of Claire and Brianna on one hand, and the very first meet, the very first union between Brianna and Jamie.
Your message for me, lass?
So from the get-go on this episode, we get to know that Roger is already there. He even crosses paths with Fergus. Jamie and Claire are there as well, visiting Marcelly, Fergus and their baby, and responding to the summons by the governor to attend the theater. But one of my favorite parts about these kind of scenes, by the way, is the sarcastic tone in Claire's voice and how Jamie is kind of blunter with these things. Claire tells you about the invitation, makes you realize in the process that she does not like it, and makes it clear as well that there was more force in accepting it rather than it being something that they had a choice at. While Jamie, when it comes to these kind of things, is just a straight arrow. We got summoned. So yeah, it does sometimes feel like Jamie is kind of trying to translate her sarcasm into regular English just in case someone wouldn't get it or wouldn't understand it. But next up though is number 3. The level of detail when it comes to certain events in the story is pretty fascinating, pretty well done. What it does is, in so many instances, it covers up for missing bits and pieces from the story, the kind of bits and pieces that you need to see signs of. It also does the job of providing for a huge and powerful build-up, the kind of build-up needed to advance the story. An example out of this episode would be that we all probably know for sure that Claire has probably been worried sick and wondering how her daughter was doing back when she left her in the 20th century. But however though, most if not all fans do realize it is not really a necessity that she mentions it on each and every episode. But with her reunion with her daughter coming soon, kicking in soon, it was necessary that we see this conversation between her and Marcelly on this episode. Let's not forget as well that the acting for the character is amazing, so it is not really what she said, it is not how she said it, but it is the look in her eyes after she makes the statement.
You can't protect them from everyone and everything.
Let us not forget as well that this was a great foreshadowing tool, this conversation. At the very end of the episode, something does happen to her daughter that she couldn't protect her from, something that she doesn't even know happened. Hell, she doesn't know that her daughter has already gone through the stones and made it to her time. But moving on to number 4, Roger finds Brianna. She looks helpless and hopeless, but the reunion scene, that in my opinion was pretty decent and pretty good. Some of the best admissions of love on TV, novel pages, and in the movies do happen when a person is angry, so I'm not gonna go to the extent of calling this a cliché on Brianna's end. However though, Lizzie watching them seemingly fight through the window is part of the setup to her believing in the novel that Roger happens to be the perpetrator of the assault against Brianna. But more on that later, because finally, I really love the improvement when it comes to Sophie Skelton's acting. Now I do know and I do realize that I did mention this on my review of episode 7, but the way she talks in this very low tone that does have a certain sound of innocence and naiveness to it, the look on her face and all, especially when she's talking to Roger, all of it put together reminds me of a young Diane Keaton portraying the role of Kay Adams on The Godfather Part 1. But number 5, Brianna accepts Roger's marriage proposal. The "how could I say no to a man who's pursued me for over 200 years? That sort of statement was expected in a way, but very 90s movies as well. You know, the kind of thing you would hear in those Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan movies from back then. But that is besides the point, because that two-person wedding ceremony was really different, really romantic, and really unique. It gives the part of the story that has to deal with the romance between Brianna and Roger its own edge. But number 6 though, Edmund Fanning is not really a character of the 4th novel in this series. Fanning instead makes his debut on the 5th novel and is a very minor character at that. So I'm definitely wondering what the plan to do with him on the series happens to be. Maybe they're gonna extend his character to beyond what he is in the novel. So I'm talking here something similar to what they did with the character of Murtaugh. But the governor, on the other hand, he happens to be quite the major character in comparison and has been party to both novels, Drums of Autumn and The Fiery Cross. But next up is number 7, Claire acting like a young schoolgirl who just spotted her favorite celebrity in the mall. That happens to be right at that moment that she realizes that she is staring at George Washington. So she asks to be introduced to him, makes comments that would tell that she's from the future, if anyone actually knew that time travel was possible here, and following that she gets overexcited as she tells Jamie all about him, how he's the one to win the war against the British and become the first elected president of the nation. But once again, the devil is in the detail, and the details on the series are a lot. The details in the books as well are a lot. So I do like over here how Claire is portrayed as smart enough to realize that she needs to explain what elected means to Jamie. We've got to remember here that at that point in time, the concept was pretty alien, pretty foreign. But with her excitement comes a second time this episode has been building up towards her reunion with Brianna. Right then and there, she mentions how Brianna would have had 100 questions on her mind if she were to be there. So the entire thing, the conversation she has with Marcelly early on about protecting their children from everything and their inability to do so, along with her mention of Brianna on the scene, all of it has been put together on this episode in order to remind us that Brianna is constantly on Claire's mind. But number 8, the entire situation that the series has got going on with Murtaugh, his entire arc, all of that is actually out of the realm of the novel. Now I might have forgotten to mention this on last week's review, but everything about Murtaugh happens to be a surprise on the season. In the novels, the man happens to have died in the 1740s, so he's not really alive at this point in the story with the events happening in the late 1760s. But I'm not really complaining over here. I don't think anyone is, considering how the character was made a lot more interesting for the TV series. So while the return of Murtaugh happens to be a major deviation from the novels, the source material, it is still a very welcome addition, and the way his character has been built on the TV series from the get-go has always allowed for very powerful storytelling. But speaking of Murtaugh brings us to number 9. Finding out from the governor that Murtaugh is being set up, Jamie becomes extremely uneasy and very eager to save him. Now it is true that their most recent encounter was not really the best, but it does still make sense that Jamie would want to save him. I mean, he's his godfather, and he's done so much for him over so many years. So there he is, Jamie, trying to figure out how to save Murtaugh and how to warn him, and there it is, number 10. We get one reason why Edmund Fanning was introduced this early into the run of the story. So Jamie uses the situation going on with Fanning to his advantage. The pain the man is feeling, that was pretty much highlighted the moment we met the guy, is utilized by Jamie to interrupt the play, allowing him to sneak out unnoticed and warn Murtaugh. So he sneaks out, gets in the carriage with the Washingtons, goes home, gets to Fergus, has him reach Murtaugh before it's too late, and Murtaugh ends up warned, saved, and informed of the spy that he's got amidst his camp. But number 11, not the biggest of moments over here, but it is worth mentioning. Surgery, the way Claire makes her way into becoming well-renowned and well-respected in so many societies, past and present, getting all the compliments in the world in the process as well. So does it get repetitive? Yes it does, but nonetheless we need to realize that this is her strong suit. Let's not forget as well that she comes from 200 years into the future where medicine is way more advanced. So if that knowledge is not really highlighted and utilized every time it is needed over here, then there is something majorly wrong with the writing for the series. But number 12, the first Brianna and Roger fight in the 1700s, just by the novel, him knowing about what happens to her parents in the future and not telling her, keeping it to himself the first time he found out in order to spare her the pain of knowing, Honestly though, her argument does sound a little bit flawed, and his argument makes a lot more sense. I mean, her mother not being dead is quite the illusion. Think about it, she did travel back to the past on season 3 in order to spend the rest of her life over there, so it does make perfect sense that at some point in time she would end up dead. She would never make it full circle, live 200 years in order to be alive in the 20th century. But anyway though, and regardless of how much it makes sense or how nonsensical this entire sequence is, it has been pulled right out of the novel and plugged in here, except at the very end she's the one who storms out and not him. But number 13, the whole trying to save Murtaugh act might actually backfire in a huge deviation. Only this time, we need not worry about deviations to the novel. This one is gonna be a major deviation to history. But number 14, Brianna meets Stephen Bonnet, and obviously fulfilling the arc foreshadowed at the very beginning of this episode. That thing that Claire will not be there or know about in order to protect her daughter from her assault by Bonnet. Obviously as well, Lizzie has not seen her mistress from the very beginning of the episode. She was not around to witness any of this. She's also worried sick about her since she saw her with Roger. So pretty much all of that is going to support and feed into the fact that she would imagine that whatever happened to her did happen at the hands of Roger. Now, the entire thing leading up to her assault by Bonnet was not really done by the novel. There was a lot of foreplay story-wise before we got to the point of the assault. But nonetheless, the act itself has been as disgusting and as disturbing on the series as it has been on the novel. Unfortunately as well, and if we go by the books, it is gonna be quite a while before we get to see him pay for his deeds. But finally though, number 15, all in all, it was a pretty decent episode. Still as slow-paced as the 7th episode, by the way. But I think that as far as episodes go, slow ones included, this one was quite powerful in terms of build-up, leading up as well to a very powerful and iconic moment right out of the novels. One that in and out of itself would trigger one major arc, the start of one major arc that would extend over so many episodes to come in the future of the series. That being said though, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. Let me know if there is something that I might have missed that needed more elaboration and discussion on this video. You can also let me know if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, and if that were to be the case, you could always subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos, community posts, and live streams. But until that next time you decide to tune in for another one of my videos, thank you so much for tuning in to this one, and have a great day.